Imagine surviving this near-fatal illness. Like, the doctors tell you you're cured, you know?
Right, the physical crisis is over.
Exactly. Your family is throwing a party, celebrating that you finally made it home, but you haven't slept in weeks. Because every time you close your eyes, your brain insists you feel like you're being tortured in a hospital bed.
Wow. Yeah, it's a terrifying reality.
It is. The monitors, the tubes, those strangers hovering over you to your nervous system, the threat just never ended.
It's a completely different kind of battle.
Yeah, so today we're taking a deep dive into this massive medical blind spot that leaves 1 in 4 intensive care survivors fighting a battle they didn't even know they had.
1 in 4, that's a huge number.
It really is. We are unpacking a phenomenon called post-intensive care syndrome, or PICS, and we're going to explore how modern telehealth, specifically looking at an informational brief from a practice called coping and healing counseling, is uniquely positioned to treat this hidden fallout.
Which is such an important mission for us today, really.
Absolutely, because reading this brief, the thing that just hooked me immediately is this realization that surviving a critical illness leaves these lasting marks that have absolutely nothing to do with the original diagnosis.
Nothing at all. It's wild.
Okay, let's unpack this. What actually happens to a person's mind when their body is pushed to the absolute brink in an ICU?
Well, it fundamentally rewires how the brain processes reality. I mean, we have this culturally ingrained idea that a hospital stay is just, a physical event.
Right, you go in, they fix you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your body breaks, the doctors fix it, you go home and rest.
Yeah.
But post-intensive care syndrome, it just shatters that assumption.
Yeah.
PICS is this systemic, multi-layered decline that hits 3 distinct areas all at the same time.
So it's not just one thing.
No, not at
Wait.
all. It hits cognitive function, psychological well-being, and physical function simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it isn't just like muscle atrophy from being in bed. It is a synchronized collapse of the brain's ability to think clearly, the emotional center's ability to regulate mood, and, the body's ability to move.
Which completely flips the entire concept of medical recovery on its head. It means the battle actually isn't over when the ventilator is turned off.
Not even close. In fact, for a significant portion of patients, turning off the ventilator is when the psychological battle truly begins.
That is so heavy.
It is. Like I mentioned, the brief notes that studies show around 25% of ICU survivors experience significant PTSD symptoms.
Wait, really? PTSD?
Yeah, 1 in 4.
I think most of us listening immediately associate post-traumatic stress disorder with military combat or maybe a singular violent event like a car crash.
Right, which is exactly why this condition flies under the radar for so long.
Yep.
But think about the environment of an intensive care unit from the perspective of an incapacitated nervous system.
Right.
There are constant alarms, invasive procedures.
And the lights, right.
Yes, the artificial lighting that completely destroys your circadian rhythm. Plus, you are often physically restrained or, paralyzed by medication.
Oh, gosh, yeah. That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Because the brain doesn't care that the medical team is trying to save your life.
Mm-hmm.
It only registers that it's trapped in this environment of constant, unpredictable pain and sensory overload.
So the medical intervention itself is processed as a profound trauma.
Exactly.
And the manifestations of that trauma, according to the text, they're incredibly specific. Like, it's not just a vague sense of anxiety, right?
Yeah, it's very targeted.
Survivors deal with this heavy brain fog that completely disrupts their cognitive return to normal life. Like, they can't remember words, they can't balance a checkbook.
Right, the cognitive piece is huge.
But the symptom that I am completely stuck on involves these hyper-specific nightmares and these phantom memories of the ICU.
What's fascinating here is how the brain actively invents its own trauma during medical delirium.
Invents it, like making it up.
Well, yes and no. When a patient is heavily sedated or battling a massive infection, their brain is still receiving sensory input.
Okay, yeah, like hearing things.
Exactly. The beeping of monitors, the feeling of a breathing tube, doctors talking. But the cognitive centers that normally make sense of that information, they're completely offline.
Oh, I see.
So the amygdala, the brain's fear center, it tries to create a narrative out of all that chaotic sensory data. It weaves those beeps and physical sensations into a terrifying hallucination.
Wow.
Yeah, so a patient might vividly remember being held hostage or interrogated or even subjected to experiments.
That is, I mean, it's like waking up from a hyper-realistic nightmare, but you never get the relief of realizing it was just a dream.
Because to your nervous system, it wasn't a dream, it was your actual lived reality.
A physiological imprint has to be identical.
It is. The body released the exact same cortisol, the same adrenaline, as if the event had objectively occurred in the physical world.
But then you have your family sitting next to your bed saying, no, honey, you were safe in the hospital. None of that happened.
Right, trying to comfort them.
Yeah. I mean, they mean well, obviously, but they are inadvertently gaslighting the survivor's nervous system. It has to be the most isolating feeling in the world.
It's incredibly lonely.
Which brings me to a really pointed question for you, actually. How does a mental health professional even begin to treat a trauma stemming from a memory that didn't physically happen in reality, but is entirely real to the patient?
But you have to completely abandon the instinct to debate the facts.
Okay.
If a clinician tries to use logic to, like, talk a patient out of a delirium-induced memory, they will fail. And they will likely re-traumatize the patient in the process.
Because you can't logic away a nervous system response.
Exactly. You cannot reason a nervous system out of a physiological response.
Mm-hmm.
A skilled trauma therapist validates the emotional reality of the memory. The terror was real. The helplessness was real.
Right.
So you treat the physical trapped energy of that terror rather than fact-checking the narrative. But, the tragedy is that the vast majority of these patients never even make it to a therapist's office to begin that process.
Because they don't even know they have a syndrome. They just think they're going crazy.
Exactly.
And that points directly to what the source calls a massive systemic failure at the exact moment of hospital discharge. I mean, the hard part is most people go home with a discharge packet that only covers physical recovery.
Right, the binder.
Yeah, the binder. You get detailed instructions on wound care, you get a strict schedule for physical therapy, but there is absolutely zero mention of PICS.
None at all.
Nothing about the nightmares or the brain fog. Think about the tragedy of that information gap.
It leaves them totally unprepared.
Totally unprepared because there is no warning about PICS in the discharge packet. Patients jump to two false conclusions. They assume they're either just weak or they feel like they are being ungrateful for having survived.
Right. And as the brief explicitly states, neither is true. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see how the modern medical system strictly separates physical healing from psychological healing.
They act like they're two totally different things.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
The hospital's primary metric for success is biological survival. If your heart is beating and your lungs are clearing, you are categorized as a success story. You won.
And society expects you to play the role of the victorious survivor.
Society demands it. The narrative is always, you're so lucky to be alive.
Yeah, count your blessings.
Right. So when you find yourself crying uncontrollably, or you're terrified to go to sleep because of the nightmares, you feel like you are failing at being a survivor.
Oh, that's devastating.
The burden of that expected gratitude actually compounds the trauma. You are drowning in the aftermath of the most terrifying experience of your life, and your reward is feeling guilty that you weren't happier about it.
Yeah, that is just, it's so bleak. But we aren't just here to talk about how bleak the situation is, because having established this immense burden, the information from Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, outlines actual evidence-based solutions.
Yes, there is real hope here.
There's a documented clinical path forward for medical trauma. And the two primary modalities they highlight are trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR.
Right, TFCBT and EMDR.
I think most of us have a vague understanding of CBT, right? Identifying negative thought patterns and reframing them. But EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, how does moving your eyes actually do anything to fix a traumatized nervous system?
I know, it sounds almost like pseudoscience until you look at the neurology behind it.
Okay, break it down for me.
So, when you experience a severe trauma, the memory isn't stored normally. It gets stuck in the emotional center of the brain, the amygdala.
The fear center.
Right, along with all the original sights, sounds, and physical sensations. It never gets filed away as in the past.
It feels like it's happening right now.
Exactly. So EMDR uses bilateral stimulation, which could be side-to-side eye movements, tapping, or audio tones, to engage the brain's working memory while the patient briefly focuses on the traumatic memory.
So you're forcing the brain to do two things at once.
Precisely. Your working memory only has so much capacity. By taxing it with the bilateral stimulation, the brain just doesn't have enough bandwidth to hold on to the intense emotional charge of the memory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the memory begins to lose its vividness. Over time, it gets reprocessed and filed away in the cortex as a standard historical event. It stops feeling like a present tense threat.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's where it gets really interesting. One of the cruelest ironies of PICS mentioned in the text is that survivors develop a literal dread of walking into any medical building.
Yes, the sterile smell, the fluorescent lights.
The waiting room chairs, those are all massive triggers. So how do you treat a medical trauma when the medical environment itself is the trigger?
It's a huge barrier to care.
Right. And the brilliant irony, or I guess the solution here, is that CHC operates entirely via secure 100% HIPAA compliant video. They bypass the very trigger of the trauma. Patients never have to sit in another medical waiting room.
I really cannot overstate how vital that structural detail is to actual healing. I mean, a licensed clinician's job isn't just to start applying CBT or EMDR on day one.
Right.
It is to first figure out exactly what is going on and what would actually help, and establish safety. If a patient is triggered just sitting in a clinic waiting room, their defense mechanisms are already at maximum capacity before the therapist even walks in.
Bypassing the waiting room trigger allows the nervous system to be calm enough for therapy to even begin, because they feel safe enough to actually attend.
Exactly. With telehealth, the patient remains in the one environment they still control, their own home. That environmental control instantly lowers the nervous system's baseline defense.
That makes a lot of sense. So telehealth removes that physical barrier. Let's look at how coping and healing counseling removes the logistical and financial barriers to getting this evidence-based care.
Because logistics are often just as traumatic.
Totally. Knowing you need trauma therapy and actually getting it are two different realities. But looking at the scale and scope of CHC, they serve all 159 counties in Georgia.
That's a massive geographic footprint.
It is. And they have a diverse, culturally competent team of over 15 licensed therapists. The text specifically highlights LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTs.
Which is really important.
Yeah, having that wide net of offerings. They do individual, couples, family, and teen therapy for ages 13 and up, as well as life coaching.
Right.
And it's not just PICS. Their specialties go beyond trauma and PTSD. They handle anxiety, depression, grief, relationships, and stress.
Well, and having those different licenses, LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs, means they can look at the trauma through different clinical lenses. An LMFT can help the family system, while an LCSW can look at environmental factors.
Which is exactly what you need for something this complex. But let's talk about the financial details, because this is a critical affordability aspect. Handing a traumatized person a massive therapy bill is just another trauma.
It's financial toxicity.
Right. So breaking down the numbers from the source, Medicaid patients have a $0 copay.
Wow.
Zero. While most commercial plans, they specifically name Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana range from just $10 to $40 a session.
That removes a huge stress barrier.
So what does this all mean? Summarizing everything we've looked at today, it means that CHC has essentially built a safety net designed to catch people exactly when they are ready to reach out.
They've created a system that respects the reality of a traumatized nervous system.
Exactly. So for anyone listening, if you want to reach them, you can find them at chtherapy.com, email them at support@chtherapy.com, or call 404-832-0102.
It's so crucial to just make that connection.
It really is. So wrapping up our deep dive today, I just want to thank you, the listener, for exploring this crucial intersection of critical illness recovery and accessible mental health care. Surviving the ICU is really only step one. Healing the mind from the trauma of that survival is just as vital.
And thanks to resources like CHC in Georgia, that help is actually accessible from the safety of home.
Absolutely.
You know, before we go, this whole exploration raises an uncomfortable but, I think, necessary question.
Oh.
Yeah, if our modern medicine is getting so advanced that we are saving bodies that previously wouldn't have survived the ICU, isn't it time we completely redefine the medical definition of survival?
Oh, wow.
Right. We must ask ourselves, is merely keeping the biological body alive a complete medical success if we abandon the mind in the process?
That is such a powerful thought to end on. We have to treat the whole person.
We really do.
Well, we invite you to keep seeking out knowledge, check out the resources discussed if you or a loved one need them, and remind you to join us for our next deep dive. Take care.